know that we all gonna be alright. We gon' make it through if it takes us all night. No matter what the odds may bring our way, I can see the blessings coming our way. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Blessings on blessings, yeah. I can see the blessings coming our way. Our way, our way. Blessings on blessings, yeah. I can see the blessings coming our way.
Hey guys, it's
Dre
and Bre, and you're tuned in to Worth the Wait
podcast.
Hey.
It's our first episode, and we're super excited, man. Like, relationship restored was always a dream. That's like what I love to do. Bre loves to help people. We love to help people, and we already been putting out content like this before, but now it's in this podcast form, and we get to go a little bit more in depth into a lot of different topics. So we're super excited about that. Bre, I'm gonna let her kind of summarize who we are in our relationship, because she does that a lot better than me. She's better than me at a lot of stuff. But just for people who don't know who we are, like, just tell them like a little bit about us before we hop into this topic.
Yes, so if you don't already know, Dre and I were basically told by a mutual friend that we needed to meet. I got a call saying, I met your husband. You got to come meet him. Long story short, when we met, we were not in a space to receive each other. We went about 8 months not talking. And then through a random move, ended up connecting, finding out that Dre was waiting for marriage. I was abstaining, and I was like, sure, I'll agree to this thing. Honestly, didn't think he would stick to it, but he sure did. So we waited 4 years for marriage. We lived together like 3 to 4 months into us dating. So that was crazy. And we are now married. We do not have any children. And what Worth the Wait is all about is sharing our journey of our weight, the benefits and, you know, the pros and cons of what that looked like. And now that we're on the opposite end of waiting, the reality that comes after marriage. So that's what we are going to be talking about on this podcast, and really just trying to make sure that everyone is aware that, like, we are being fully transparent. We're very honest and open about everything that we go through. And now that we're on the other end, what do we really think about waiting?
Exactly. So this first episode is really cool because it's talking about, like, through this podcast, as Bre said, we're going to be talking about our relationship, but this episode is talking about how we met, and we're linking that to how to know that the person that you're talking to is actually the one for you. Because we've all dated a lot of different people. Maybe you found your person, maybe you haven't. But, you know, some people need to know, like, is this person, how do I know that this person is the right person for me? So in that, I feel like it's important first for you to understand, like, our backgrounds and how we got to where we are. Because Bre and I, let you guys know, are completely different. Mm-hmm. We're very opposite. The way we were raised was very different from one another. Mm-hmm. So I just want to,
wow,
excuse me. I tried to do it off the mic, but I want to start where it all began. So, like, how we grew up. Mm-hmm. So, Bre, I want to start by asking you a question.
Okay.
Or we can start here just talking about, I want to know, just tell our listeners and viewers, like, kind of your experience growing up, what, I guess, influences you saw when it came to relationships, and, like, your parents' situation, were your parents married, divorced? Of course I know, but I just want people to have a little context, because maybe they can relate to your situation, and when you're ultimately telling about the things that you've gone through and been through and are dealing with, that maybe they can, you know.
Yeah, and the reason why this is so important is because sometimes people don't take these things into consideration when they meet another human being. And it's like, you have to take these things into consideration, because sometimes things are learned and they're not by choice, and you have to work really hard to unlearn those things. So for me, my dad left when I was 4, and all I really remember at the time of me, like, getting into dating and boys and stuff, my mom had these home videos where my dad was in them, and he seemed like a great dad. Like, I was so excited to see him. Like, we would just have such a good time, and I'm like, he's great at this. Like, what the heck happened? What made him leave me, you know? And I know that things don't always work out with adults, but that was, for me, my first, like, connection to men was that this person, the one person who is supposed to stay by your side, love you, provide for you, and care for you, like just left me. So I already was starting in the game not expecting men to be great to me. That was one reason. The second reason is that my mom was a single mom. So she had my brother by another man, and they ended up not working out. And then we had foster care kids, and it was this guy after that guy. And my mom just couldn't find anybody worth settling down with. And my whole upbringing, she was never in like a true committed relationship. She actually got married in her 50s and got divorced quickly after. So
question for you as growing up, what was, when you were growing up and your mom was dating, what was probably the longest relationship that she had that,
she did have one relationship. I felt like it was unhealthy though, and I didn't like the man at all. I honestly don't know. And they were on and off. I really don't know time frame.
Gotcha.
I would say maybe 2 years, but like on and off.
Okay. So how did you feel like that, seeing that, I guess, would you call it a rotation, I guess?
Yeah. And, what I would say, though, is honestly, my mom wasn't the biggest, that wasn't the situation that made me feel like this is what I'm learning about love. Okay. I was learning about love through people who are actually married and like families that had the mom and dad in the home, and they were very unhealthy. So I grew up seeing people cheating on their spouses or abusing their spouses. Like it just was never a good situation until meeting Dre and meeting his family, his mom and his pop and his aunt and uncle. Those were the first actual like healthy marriages I ever saw. So I just was always under the assumption that that thing is really hard to find and I haven't seen it yet. So what tells me that I can have it? It just was, difficult, I guess. Gotcha. Made me feel hopeless at times.
Gotcha. Okay.
And how about you?
Well, I mean, my situation, but for me, my mom and biological dad were divorced ever since I could remember. I can't even imagine my mom and dad together. Like, couldn't even imagine it. You didn't have the pleasure of meeting my dad, but because my dad did die when I was 16 as well, or passed away when I was 16. But yeah, I couldn't even imagine my actual parents together, but my dad was always in my life. I always saw my dad every single day. A lot of times he would pick me up from practices, come to all my games. I did a lot of sports, so when it came to like traveling or basketball and different things like that, he would be the one that would take me to all those things. And then my parents, as far as co-parenting, that relationship was so good. Like my dad used to be at Granny's house for holidays and stuff like that. So imagine, and Granny, for those who don't know, is my mom's mom. My grandmother, who Bre takes after a lot. They are like two peas in a pot. But yeah, my dad used to be at my mom's house, my grandmother's house all the time. So for me growing up, even though my parents were together, the relationship was still like really, really good. Of course, I didn't know everything that went on behind the scenes or if there were any issues, but they were cool. So when I turned around 12, 13, that's when my mom met my stepdad, who I now call Pop. And I want to actually go back a little bit because I think even though my mom and dad were in good standing and they were cordial and they, didn't argue in front of me, I still lived in a house with just my mom. So I think my mindset when it came towards relationships and how to do those may have been a little bit different because my mom like mowed the lawn. My mom fix something in the house if it needed to be fixed. If there was like something wrong with the floor, we would change the floors. If there was something wrong with the hot water tank, she would open it up and try to figure it out. Light bulb need to be changed. So up into
that's why you're such a problem solver.
But up into my mom actually being with my stepdad and marrying my stepdad, my impression of women and how women operate was that of my mom, and women do everything, right? So I remember one time with my stepdad, it was a surprise to me to where it was like, my mom came home with groceries and my stepdad was like, don't get them, the boys will come out and get them. I'm like, my mom could take these groceries in herself. Why do I have to go out there and get the groceries when she's coming from the car? Like, she has nothing in her hand.
Okay, so to this point, and don't forget where you're going with this, but to that point, there's a lot of women that grow up in single families, like, you know, myself, where we see our moms being the superwoman and they always provide. And even when my mom was in relationships, I was seeing her still be the provider. And I think that's why when I did start dating, I took that same role and it ended up doing me no good. But yeah, so that is important. Keep going.
Yeah, so it wasn't until they got married and we were in the household together to where I got to see the way first a man operates in a relationship with a woman. Like, that's one story. I remember another story where my mom was ironing my stepdad's clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And I like brought my stuff up, like, she about to iron my clothes. And my stepdad was like, no, that's my wife. That's my wife. You iron your own clothes. My wife will iron my clothes. And it was just like things I just never, because my mom did everything. Even though my dad was around and my dad was great, I lived with my mom and my mom did everything. So me trying to grasp the concept of chivalry or acting like a gentleman or what a man does, how to lead, like, I had to learn that with my stepfather being around. And that was also a great time for me to learn, like, or a great time for me to see that happy, healthy relationships and committed relationships is real and it's a possibility, which I realized that a lot of people that I used to talk to, they talk as if committed, healthy relationships don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not anything. You can't have that. It's not achievable. People cheat, people do this, they do that. Like, it's just not a thing. And I'm like, I grew up being able to see that in my stepdad and my mom. And it's crazy how, and I won't go on for too much longer, but it's crazy how the switch happened because my dad died when I was 16 years old. And that's really when my stepdad was really starting to really move and make an impact into my life. And I think that things do happen for a reason. I don't know, honestly, if I would have been, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way because I would love for my dad to be here. Like, awesome. Like, that was my road dog. Like, but I don't know if I would have been able to receive everything my stepdad was going to give me if my dad was still here, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense.
You know, so I think that everything happens for a reason. And I think my dad was honestly at peace with who was going to be raising me once he knew that things were getting a little rough and that he may not be here in the future. So yeah, that's my upbringing. And I'll also add that I had my second mom and dad, which were like my aunt and uncle, who Bre is talking about, my aunt Deb and Uncle Dave, and being able to see that relationship and happy and healthy. And I think all of that side of my family, really, pretty much my mom and stepdad, you have my aunt and Uncle Dave, even Pop Dad, my grandfather and Mimi, they were together for, you know, until my grandmother passed, and then Granny and Pop, and, you know, everybody was just in marriages, happy, healthy. It was a lot of family things, gatherings. So I don't know, that was my influence. And I think that impacted me in the future because I was able to see healthy relationships pretty much all my life. So I knew that that was achievable. But I think you were about to say something. Oh, okay. So I always told Bre this in the beginning of our relationship. Like, I always had this dream as a kid of being in a relationship. Like, it was something that to find this one person that you want to spend the rest of your life with must be this amazing thing. Like, it must be amazing to find this one person. And I think a lot of that was rooted in my experiences growing up and what I actually saw from my parents.
And then I think the biggest thing, because you had that great, awesome, you know, like real life, see it every day experience and example, whereas I didn't. But then this is where we kind of, I guess, make up for it, because I had a lot of serious relationships. So I had a lot of relationships and experiences to learn from that involved me, whereas you didn't really commit yourself. You had one girlfriend before me. So we got to talk about how that, I guess, affects the long term of like a relationship and dating in general.
Yeah.
So how would you say, like,
well, let me ask you this.
mm-hmm.
What was your first, what you would call a serious relationship?
His name was Pierre Love, and we were in high school. But when I say serious because it was my first time like really kissing a boy and like spending time, and like I spent the night at his house and we went to prom and we did all the things, and that was like, I guess, like dating. And that just turned into happening to be my boyfriend. But until having that boyfriend, I didn't really like deal with boys. So that was my first time. It was high school and I was 9th grade.
Got you. But the situation with, and I'm jumping ahead because I know a little bit about Bre, but the situation with Walt, can you talk about that? Because I want to know explain that situation, your relationship with him, and how you feel like that affected you, because that was pretty traumatic.
So Walt was my, like, I started dating him in high school senior year, and basically, long story short, Walt was someone who grew up in a family and in a lifestyle where he was either going to be a drug dealer or, I mean, I don't even know, like, not, but like the not was like very far-fetched, because just in the area that he lived in, what he knew growing up, when I first met him, he was selling drugs and was hiding it, because I was in college once he started doing that. And I was like asking him questions like, you know, like, how are you getting all these things? And how are you buying me this? And how are you buying me that? And when he ended up coming clean about what he was doing, I initially was kind of like attracted to like the bad boy vibes. And like, I mean, okay, I could dig it. You know, like I was in love with him. Like he was my everything at that time. So I kind of started to just deal with the things, and I started to take on certain ways, and I'm putting myself in really stupid situations. And fast forward to college, Walt ends up moving in with me, and we got him a job. It seemed like he was doing really well. He's had all these conversations with me about how he doesn't want to do this and he doesn't want to do that. But the way the gangs work, you kind of can't just do your own thing. So he was kind of stuck in a situation because of his brothers and his dad. And it was just like he had no way of escaping it. So that's why he came to move with me, to try to get out of that. And one day I came back home to my apartment and he was gone. My car was gone. There was no money in my bank account. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So next day, find out he's in jail. He calls me and I'm like, where is my money? And he was like, I took it so I could like flip this so that like it could pay for our rent for the next few months. And I'm like, our rent? Like it's my money. Like, what do you mean our rent? We aren't paying our rent. I am paying my rent. So it was very frustrating. I got in multiple situations where I was pulled over, had a gun in my car. I've done jail time over messing with this boy. And we had a great relationship. He was a great person, but he just was not set up for success. He ended up dying in a shooting. He was shot 19 times to the body while he was getting his haircut and at the barbershop. And some other people died and were injured. And it was like really crazy because I had to be a part of the whole situation. So I was one of the first people that got the call, had to do like the witnessing of his body, had to talk to his family, and then like going to the funeral. And I mean, it was just super, super traumatic, because the last conversation that he had with me was like, live your life to the fullest, essentially, and telling me that I could do better than him. So yeah, that's kind of like my one, I would say I have two, really three relationships that I feel have shaped me. But what he taught me and what dating him kind of made me realize was that I had this need for feeling wanted and needed. Like I liked being like the girl who's like too good for you, but that you have anyways. And that was terrible because then I started dating guys who were not what I should have been with, but it made me feel good to step in and like be this person who could fix them. And guess what? None of them ever got fixed. So that method is a terrible dating method. Terrible.
Do you think that so your need to want to fix, do you relate that back? Have you ever looked and thought like, does that have anything to do with like maybe the different relationships that you had, or the relationship maybe you had with like your dad, or like how do you feel like that relationship affected you and how you date, and or do you think it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely dad related. Right before I actually moved to DC and before me and Dre became boyfriend and girlfriend, I told him, I was like, I'm going to just like reach out to my dad and like, I'm just going to ask him like, what the heck, you know, because after I was 4, I saw him when I was like 17. He like popped up at a random basketball game at my school that I was cheering at. And it was so embarrassing. He had this like big picture frame that was like blown up of a cheerleading photo of me. And he comes in and he's like, I don't even know who he is at this point. So I'm confused. And it just hurt my feelings so bad that you think you could just leave and then just pop up because then you know where I've been living, you know where I go to school. Come to find out, he lived less than 10 minutes away from me, my whole from 4 to 17. Like, that's sad. So I was very upset. I didn't want to talk to him. And then I ended up going to a trip because my mom talked me into like giving him a chance. And at this point I was 18. That relationship, or that trip, I should say, taught me pretty much everything I needed to know about my dad, and that need that I had really started there. I ended up going to Atlanta. He treated me so poorly. He was just saying such nasty things to me as if he knows me. He was saying things about like, oh, you shouldn't wear that. You look like you want to get pregnant. And like, you look like a hoe. And I mean, it was summertime. I had on like a spaghetti strap shirt and like shorts. I was 18 in Atlanta at a family cookout. Like, what's the problem? But I realized on my way home, because I caught a flight by myself, that that's when it started. And I didn't know that right then and there. I didn't know until later. So after that whole situation and me dating and feeling like I like this, like I like feeling this need, you don't know that you're doing it in the moment. You only know until after the situation ends and you're self-reflecting and looking and being like, why would I deal with this? Like, what was I doing? So by my 3rd relationship of having the same dating pattern, that's when I realized, I think my dad is the reason why I'm like this. And I needed clarity. So I reached out to my dad. It went very poorly. Essentially, I just asked him, like, why did you leave me when I was 4? And like, can you just explain to me, like, my mom doesn't say anything bad about you. Can you just tell me what's up? And I did know that my dad is bipolar and he was an alcoholic and schizophrenic as well. So I was like, okay, well, obviously he has some issues. But my dad told me that when I was 5, he tried to pick me up from school and take me to Six Flags, like in the morning. Like, I'm getting dropped off at school. He shows up, tries to put me in his car. You've been gone for a year and you just pop up. And so I'm like, where's my mommy? You know, like, I'm not a dumb 5-year-old kid. I'm like, no, where's my mom? And like, I got to go to school. And essentially he said I wouldn't get in the car, that I started like kicking and crying, and my teachers took me inside. And so it was on me, not him. And okay. So he said that day I started doing coke or crack or whatever. Like, he started doing drugs because I didn't get in the car with him. When I was in Cleveland, right before I moved down here, I was 23 years old.
Wow, that's a lot to put on somebody.
Yeah. I was like, huh? But this is also why me and you were able to work out. Dre's the first person that I have dated that essentially was put in my position that I always put myself in. Like, he was in the fixer position essentially, because I was coming with all this baggage and all these things. And it was like, for once I had someone who was like looking out for me and trying to provide for me and trying to teach me and grow with me. And that also can be very traumatic as well, because then if you go from feeling like you're the fixer to always feeling like you're the problem, now we got some other issues and insecurities that creep in. And then, you know, anger issues, like me getting mad and upset and feeling frustrated because at the end of the day, I don't know how to deal with these things because now I'm in a totally different boat than I've ever been in.
For sure. No, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later as we start to talk about like how we met and how we knew each other was the one. But you said that there were 2 other relationships in the past that helped shape your perspective and how you view relationships today. Do you mind like touching on those a little bit?
Yeah. So the second one, I don't know why my legs are crossed like that. The second one, MJ the DJ.
She's using real names, by the way.
I am using real names. I don't care. They know. I'm speaking facts. So MJ the DJ. I was a Cavaliers NBA dancer. And, you know, I was kind of feeling myself at this point because I'm like dancing for the NBA. You know, I was all in shape and stuff. And I was going to Cleveland State and MJ was a DJ. So I was underage and he was getting me into like the different spots. And, you know, he was like around celebrities and all of that.
And
but
when you say underage, you mean under 21. Yes, not 18, guys.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Under 21. But he essentially made me feel cool, but he had a lot of issues because of his upbringing too. He was like in adoption and foster care growing up, and he would always tell me these sob stories that I would end up finding out wasn't necessarily true. And he was just a great manipulator. And even though I think at the core, he's a good person. I think everyone at the end of the day doesn't wake up trying to be a bad person, but he would just do things that would always make me feel like I was so terrible, but I knew it was like, oh, it's because he's broken. And like, I can fix him if I just love up on him. And I think I had this connection to him because he's the complete opposite of my type. Like, I like dark-skinned men, like build to you. He was like tall, skinny, little, scrawny, light-skinned guy. And he was like nerdy and just was not my type. I fell in love with the idea of MJ when he told me his story about like the foster care and adoption stuff, because, you know, I grew up yeah. So I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, and it was like trying to heal a wounded dog, you know? And it was like, no matter how much I loved him, he just wouldn't get his act together. And he did some crazy things to me. And I'm not going to talk about that because I'm telling y'all who he is, but it was some bad things that made me lose all trust in guys. I'm like, who would do something like this? And I was doing things not just as his girlfriend, but as a friend, because we had a friendship before anything. So that is what hurt me the most, because I'm like, bro, like, you don't even do stuff like this to strangers, and you did this to me. And we're talking about credit stuff, okay? Like business stuff, like stuff that like messed up things for me. The third is Tay, and this is a guy who came from a pre-existing marriage. So he was like newly divorced. He had 3 kids, and he essentially like pretended to be this person that he wasn't. I was always put in situations where I was made to be the bad guy, or just a lot was always put on me at one time, and I was always going above and beyond doing the things for him. And then when it would come a moment for him to do something for me, he would always drop the ball. And again, I think this was so similar and tied to like the daddy situation. At this point, I wasn't aware. I was doing anything I could just so that he didn't leave me, even though if you look at it on paper, people are like, why were you with him in the first place? Like, none of this makes sense. So those 2. And the last one was the worst because of kids being involved. I love kids, and I care for those kids. I loved them, and I pictured myself being their stepmom and like marrying him, and I don't know why. And
I've seen that happen. Don't lose that point. But I've seen that happen so many times before, to where I know people, close friends, who they met someone with children, and then they ended up really falling in love with the children. Yeah. And then when they should leave the relationship they're in, they're staying because of the relationship that they now have with that person's child. Yeah. So and luckily we weren't that close because their mommy wasn't having that. So it didn't get too crazy. But that was bad because it was a lot of cheating and lying, and yeah. And how did that impact you and your viewpoint? Because that was the relationship right before us. Yeah. So what's crazy is that actually helped me because it was so like extreme
that I was like, okay, sis, something is wrong with you. Like to be in this situation after looking at my previous exes, I was like, something is off. And it was so bad that it forced me to stop dating completely. I did not like casualty date. I didn't casually date. So that means sex was off the table. Like I need to focus on me. I started to build my relationship with God. And this is another fun fact, but I was not raised to be religious. So that was always confusing to me because I was always like, what is God? And like, we all can't be right. Why are there so many religions? And I was always confused. So I just never really dealt with it. So I actually started to pray and learn. I mean, watching YouTube videos like for kindergartners, the Adam and Eve story and who is God. And yeah. So it allowed me to just free myself of any like doubt that I had about men. And it was like more so, there probably are great guys out there. The issue is when you're broken, you don't know how to find them because when your vision is blurred, you just out here, grabbing at straws. There's no possible way that a good guy would walk in front of you and you would know it or have what it takes in yourself to actually receive that type of man because he might look at you and be like, ha, because all inside you jacked up. And so I just realized there was a lot that I needed to do if I wanted to find a good person. And even though I didn't see like marriage immediately as like a goal, I did feel that I could find somebody who would bring what I bring to the table, who would also love me, who I could have fun with, who I could have kids with. I just needed to be pickier. And in order to be picky, I needed to be up here too. So I had to work on myself so that I could attract what I ultimately wanted.
That's amazing. I know that there's probably a lot of gems in there for a lot of people. And I'm even learning new things just hearing you talk about that, especially a lot with your dad and things like that. And you being able to kind of take a look back at everything and seeing your current situation and looking at how that affects you. So we're going to stop you right there because that's like getting to the point to where we then first met.
Yes.
So now you got a lot of Bre's background.
Wait, can we talk about why you only had one girlfriend your whole life?
Yeah, that's what we're about to talk about.
Oh, okay.
But I'm just saying we had your background and your dating experiences up to like when we're about to meet.
Yes.
So I guess now it's time for me
Yes.
to talk about that. So I only say one real girlfriend.
You gonna say her name?
Yeah, I'll say her name. Devin. I had a girlfriend in high school. I don't really count it. It's like, it was 3 months. It wasn't like, it was just a high school dating thing. But I don't know, I always had this thing to where I didn't believe in cheating, right? So I wouldn't make someone my girlfriend unless I really wanted to be in a relationship with them. And I also had a very short tolerance, got bored quickly, was very picky. Tyrell's gonna laugh at me and my friend Mariah too, because I always called him picky, but I'm calling myself I was picky. But yeah, I would get bored really easy and like impatient with people. So I remember when it was my junior year of college, and throughout my college time, I talked and dated people, but necessarily nothing truly, truly serious. I think one relationship prior to my dating Devin, which impacted my life a lot, was I went to James Madison University, which is a PWI, predominantly white institution. I played football there, I was on full scholarship, stuff like that. But I met a young lady who I was dating my sophomore year, the first semester. And I think she's like white and maybe like, I don't know, Hawaiian. Like she was white, but wasn't like fully white, but she wasn't black. And that just gave me just gave me insight into like dating somebody outside my race and culture, and it just made me see
you
that
didn't like it.
She was cool. Like it just made me see that there were a lot of cultural differences. Like and not to say that if somebody wants to date that way that you can't overcome that. Mm-hmm. It's just like, for instance, if you take a black household, like a black household, and a white household, not like your mama white, like
What's that mean?
Like your mom, Genuine, Tank, like Anthony Hamilton. Like your mom got soul.
She's gonna like that.
Mama Don got soul. But like if you take a traditional white family, a traditional like black family that grow up in these areas that are traditionally white and black, even the things that you grow up doing or listening to are different. Like when I was younger, we didn't grow up listening to the Beatles or like Elvis or things like that. But if you grew up in a white family, your parents might have listened to the Beatles or Paul McCartney or I don't know, Bon Jovi. Like it's not saying one is wrong or right. It's just that there's a lot of cultural differences in how you handle things. So that impacted me and just made me be like, okay, love is love. I feel like maybe I could date someone who was white or from a different culture, but I think my preference would be to date someone black. And then I had my relationship with Devin. So my relationship with Devin came from, I shouldn't have been in that relationship in the first place. And I was warned not to do it. So my counselor, she wasn't even my counselor. That was my homie, Joy. Miss Joy. I can call her Joy now. I'm an adult. She was like my guidance counselor in college, or not my guidance counselor. She was one of the counselors, but she was like one of the few like black counselors there. So, and she was like younger. So we used to always hang out. And somehow, I don't know how, she knew Devin as well. And I thought Devin was so pretty when I first met her. And I'm like, yo, I'm going to go talk to her. And in college, it's so weird. You have this thing with guys to where it's like you don't want to date somebody who's messed with anybody else. Like, so if they mess with somebody else on the football team, it's like you would never wipe them. Or if they mess with somebody else on campus, you would never wipe them. Like, it was a weird thing. And as you get older and become an adult, you're like, that's so stupid. But that was like a thing. So at that time, she was like untainted. Like,
Untainted.
Nobody had talked to her.
You go, girl.
Like, so I'm like, yo, and I see people trying to get at her. And we've had conversations. I was like, I think she's feeling me. So I was like, I need to go now. And Joy was telling me it's not a good time. Like, I don't think she's ready for that. I don't think you're ready for that. I'm like, F it. Like, I'm going to do it anyway. So my junior year, started talking to Devin. And I mean, things started off good. She had one boyfriend before that. And at that time, I was just in a space to where I was really like feeling myself in the sense that I thought that everything I said was right. I thought that I knew it all. At that time, I didn't know that, but I thought that I knew it all. I thought I knew everything about relationships. Oh, my parents are marriage counselors and my parents had this healthy relationship. I see how they operate. All these people in my family, this is how you're supposed to do this.
You was ready for her to iron them clothes.
That's how you're supposed to do this. Like, you don't know how to cook. Like, how you not know how to cook? Like, it was like this thing to where it was like, wow, what, like, I was so critical of her. And not even knowing it. And she took it like a champ. Like, she wasn't, I mean, we had our good times in our relationship. We had some also rough times as well, but she overall was a good girl. And the thing that I learned the most from it, and it wasn't even a super long relationship. It was maybe like 3-4 months. No, like 5-6 months, something like that. But the thing that I learned the most was, number one, it was somebody I really cared about and liked. So that was like the first time I ever like had that feeling about somebody. The first time she introduced to my mom, like,
did you love her?
I thought I did. I thought I did. I didn't know what love was at 19, 20. But she was the first person I really brought home, like parents, like everything. And the way our relationship ended was because I just felt like she wasn't up to par. Like, she wasn't ready yet. Like she doesn't know how to cook. She doesn't know how to, like, the cleaning, and like she doesn't, like, I didn't feel like the womanly, how you supposed to
Y'all
take
were
care.
in college. She was supposed to clean up your dorm?
I didn't know. Like, I feel like the womanly stuff that she was supposed to do, she wasn't doing. Like, I feel like as far as sex wise, I thought at that time, like, oh, it could have been better than what it was. And yeah, I had this image in my head of what I thought she should have been, and she wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, she's not ready. Like, so, and I was like, I'm not going to cheat on her, so I'm going to break up with her. So, and the way that I broke up with her was so insensitive. It was just like, I remember I was sitting on my bed, just like playing a video game, and like she's sitting there, has no idea this is coming. And like, I'm just talking to her and then telling her like, yeah, this is not working out. Like, this is this and this is this. She's like crying. I'm like not even comforting her. I'm just like playing the game. Like, it was so insensitive.
I could not see you doing that.
And like, because I used to get to a point to when I was done with somebody, like I feel like I was done. Like, and I was like, didn't work out. And in my head, it was all her fault.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do anything wrong. You had the issue and you weren't ready for this relationship. Like, you didn't bring what you were supposed to bring to the table.
And it's because of your mom. And like seeing that, like you felt like that is what you needed.
I think a combination of my mom, but also just building up this thought in my head of what this thing would be. Like, imagine wanting something from a young age. Like I told you, I wanted to be in a relationship all my life. And it's like, imagine like, all right, if I'm making you my girl, that means I'm looking for something long term, because I don't do that in my life. I don't have girlfriends. It's because I look at something long term. So then I was like, well, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And you have some work to do. Like,
I just wish
basically,
I knew you then.
Like, that was my mindset. I didn't even know that was my mindset, but I could now look back.
To be.
Like, I was so, and shout out to my little sis, Aja. Like, she's one of the people who always like told me honestly. I remember one time she told me, like, yo, you have a big head. Like, you need to humble yourself. And I always appreciate her for that, because she always told me about myself. But like, at that moment, I was just like, yeah, she's not up to par. Like, she's not where she needs to be. So then I remember coming home that summer, going into my senior year. And this is the thing that made it even worse, is that I broke up with her, told her I cared about her, right? Broke up with you. And I could tell she still like wanted to try to make things work and stuff like that. But then I remember my boy, one of my best friends, he had a girl, and then she had a friend, and the friend was like bad.
Oh yeah, you told me about this.
Yeah, the friend was bad. So at that point I was like, yo, like, I'm trying to get on that. And then I'm also expressing my grievances to my friends, telling them everything that Devin didn't do and all that stuff. And then they're telling me, oh yeah, this girl, like, she cook, she do this, she do that, she do your laundry, like all this stuff. So I then like deleted, before I even broke up with Dev, I like deleted all our pictures from social media. I blocked her and her friends so they couldn't actually see it, because I was like, all right, I need to take advantage of this thing like right now, but I need to break up with Devin like the next day. So the night before I broke up with her, like, I did all this, like, was talking to the girl on Instagram, but she couldn't, like, of course she didn't know I was in a relationship. I told her I just got a relationship. But I didn't even break up with Dev yet. And then the next day, that's when I broke up with Dev. But the issue is that when you get in a relationship and your friends are in a relationship, then your girls become friends. So my boy Alex, and I don't hold anything against Bre, she did what she was supposed to do. Devin is her friend, and they're still friends now. So it's like, that made sense. But I had the girl, like, she came and visited, the new girl.
Bre is Alex's.
Yeah, Bre
woman.
is Alex's woman.
They're
sorry.
probably confused.
Yeah, sorry. Bre is my friend Alex's girl. So make a long story short, I have the girl come visit. The first weekend she came and visit, Bre was out of town. So she was in the house, she was cooking us dinners, like all that stuff. Like, and I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, she's doing my laundry. Like, this is how you take care of a man. The sex was good. And I was like, this is take notes. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. Next weekend, Bre's in town and she sees the girl here, and then she makes a decision to tell Devin that the girl was there, and Devin was more hurt. I remember her coming into Joy's office, and I walked by and I see her like crying or stuff like that, or like angry, and I'm like, all right, I know they talking about me. Let me come in there. And it's basically, she's just like, the fact that like you tell me you care about me, but like a week later, like you got somebody else over your house
If
doing
only
this, doing
she
that.
knew.
And I'm just like we not compatible. Like I get it. Like I'm sorry. Like I do care about you, but like we weren't compatible. So it just makes sense to move on. So it was such a heartless mindset, such a selfish mindset that I had. And I know, and this is giving a lot of women a peek into a man's mind sometimes of how they go about things. But the thing is that, because I remember talking again to my little sis Aja one time when she's asked me relationship advice about a dude that she was dealing with, and I was able to give her a lot of like, you know, perspective, because at that time I did not know what I did not know. Like I thought I was right. There was nothing in my mind that was malicious or thought that I was doing something wrong. I really thought that I was like 100% right and that she was wrong. So then that summer I left. I told my parents I broke up with Devin. They were like, oh, why? They liked Devin. Cool. She was a great girl. And I started telling my stepdad, I'm like, yo, you know, because you married to my mom, you know how she hold it down. Like, she don't cook. I was naming all these things. He was like, why does that matter? I'm like, like what? Like, she don't cook. He's like, what does that have to do with her? Like, you can learn how to cook. Like, what does that mean? Like, why that doesn't matter?
Tell him, Dad.
And I'm like, okay, well, I mean, the line, like I have needs, like I'm naming all these things to him, and everything I'm saying, he's shutting it down like easily. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, and then it hit me, yo, you were wrong. And I was like,
but
whoa.
Wait, so what happened to the girl that was giving you what you needed, the one that made the cut?
So that was another learned lesson for me, is that after a while that it started to get old. And I was just like, I don't really like this girl. And
you
all this
what
stuff
she was doing.
And all this stuff that I thought is what I needed didn't really matter. So then that had me like, okay, but it still didn't hit me yet. It hit me when, hit me when my stepdad actually broke that down to me when I was telling him about all the things that Devin wasn't doing. And when he told me that, I was just like, yo, I was so wrong. Oh my gosh, I was so wrong. And oh my gosh, it ate me up so bad, because like I said, I was not trying. I didn't think I was wrong. I didn't think I was doing anything malicious. I thought she just had to get her stuff together. Like she had the issue. Then when I realized I had the issue, then you go into this thing to where you're like trying to get this person back, and it's off of guilt, because you're like, you feel bad. So I didn't even know if I was trying to get her back because we were actually compatible, or if it was because I felt so guilty about what I did. I wanted to prove that like I'm better and I can. So, but then when I was trying to talk to her again, she would just tell me like, I don't know how I would be able to trust anything you're saying to me. Like,
good for you. Good girl.
But that relationship taught me so much. Like, it humbled me so much to where I realized like, yo, you don't know everything. It's okay not to know things. And yeah, that relationship changed everything for me. And then I was able to later apologize to her. And she received it. She understood to a certain extent. But the thing that ate me up too is that I didn't want her to think that the things that I said were true, and then you start to become like insecure about yourself because of what I told you. Mm-hmm. Like maybe if I told you like sex, like the sex wasn't good or this wasn't that or that, then you start to really believe that about yourself. So then you become insecure about those things. And that's something that ate me up too, because I was like, I don't want you to become insecure about like yourself because of something that I said to you, because in reality, I was 19. I didn't know a lot about sex either, like or what I was doing and getting you to where you needed to get. Like I wasn't the ace or the king of that either. So that was my biggest relationship that really shaped so much of my mindset leading up to, and that was like my junior year of college. So that was like maybe like 3-4 years before we actually even met. Or no, 3 years before we actually like met. But yeah, it was a very impactful relationship on my life. And Devin is amazing. she was always amazing. I just wasn't ready. But I don't know if I would be the man I am without that relationship. And yeah.
That's something that when it comes to dating, I feel like people forget that you're not supposed to end up with every person you date. And
That's very true.
These breakups, it's like, honey, let him go. Like, sometimes you're that girl that is that lesson for that man so he can find what he needs. But you just have to take that for what it is, learn from it, because there's a reason why you were also in that relationship. And that has always been the thing that makes me move on from exes easily, because I'm like, well, logically, you know, I'm not going to be with every, so like, just get over it. Like, on to the next. You're one man closer to the man you're supposed to be with, because, you know, everything happens for a reason.
It does.
But
it does. So I want to move into the next part, is when we decided that, hey, we're ready for something serious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you kind of talked about that after the Tay situation. You were in a space to where it's like, I need to get myself together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm ready for something. Have you always been a relationship person, right? Like, for a lot of your life, you've always been in like a relationship.
I don't think I've been single for more than like 6 months to a year.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Because I know people like that. I know we all know people like that. Some people who are single a lot, but then people who are always, it seems like they're always in a relationship when they get out of one.
Well, also, let me say this, because you are the only relationship that I was in where I wasn't entertaining other situations. And what I mean by entertaining is like, because all the guys that I dated were like douchewads, they would often and frequent do stupid stuff. And I knew that they were lying about certain things. And so like, I had fun. Like, I would go and do things, and things that if they knew about it, they would be like, dang. But it's like, oh, I'm gonna do you how you do me, honey. And I wasn't cheating. I wasn't having sex or doing anything like that. But I mean, I was going places and getting meals paid for me. And these are like, most of them were just friends, like not anything like that. But so even though I was in relationships, they would be like, oh yeah, come meet us up here for some drinks, you and your girls. And you may not know this, those of you listening, but I was in the clubs a lot as like, you know, doing like promoting and stuff like that. So I had fun. Even when I was in relationships, I was still out here living my best life. So there's that. So
when we're talking about what made us say like we're ready. So for me, and I think this would be important, I know we have a lot of women listeners that first you need to understand, as a woman, you can't change a man. A man has to make a conscious decision that he wants to be in a relationship and is ready for something serious. And then when he's at that point, then you can start to work with him and, you know, do that if you want something committed. But if you think you can change him, it ain't gonna happen. You're just gonna waste a lot of your time. And a lot of times when women are trying to change men, they tend to start to offer more relationship things. So then it's like you're doing more to try to get him to commit, which in reality is going to make him not want to commit.
Because he's getting it anyway.
Because he's getting more without having to commit.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like after my relationship with Dev, I don't think I really dated anybody super, super serious after that. But there was a point to where I was just like kind of running the streets, sleeping with women, and I called myself trying to chill out, but I would just get approached, and the women that I were interested in and thought looked good were interested in me. But then it just got to a point to where I got like tired. Like I really got exhausted. I was like, I'm tired of messing with women and not even like liking them enough to want to stay over. Like really, like after the act of sex, being like, so what you gonna do after this? Like not even liking you. And I'm like, this is exhausting. So in 2016, I made a decision that like, I'm ready to find a wife. And in my life, I felt whenever I did things the way that God said to do it, that it turned out even better for me than I expected. So I was like, if I want to find a wife, if I want to be intentional with this search, if I want to approach this with a sober mind, then I need to make this commitment. And on New Year's or January 1st, 2017, that's when I made the commitment to wait for marriage. No girl in sight, wasn't dating anybody at the time. I was just like, I'm
Keep in
ready.
mind, we met 8 months before this.
Yes, we could talk about that too.
I think that's another episode.
How we met. Well, it's titled How We Met, so we gotta talk about it.
But that's why I was. It's a lot.
We'll talk about quickly how we met. So, Bre.
Let me do it.
Okay.
So as I said at the beginning of the episode, a friend of mine that had just met Dre through a mutual friend called me, said, I met your husband, you have to come meet him. I came down randomly. I did not come because of that call. I came down later after I found out that my guy had cheated on me. And me and Dre ended up meeting.
It's not the real reason you came down. We're authentic here.
What do you mean?
You had a court date.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. Because the last time you were in DC.
Okay. Well, I am a productive person, so I'm a kill two birds with one stone. But I would have just went to my court date and came back. I came and I stayed with Jordan because I was in a space where, Jordan was living here. I just needed to get away. So anywho, when me and Dre met, we were hot messes. We went to this club, mutual friends, and we drank probably 6 drinks in a matter of 45 minutes because it was an open bar and it was 45 minutes left till it closed. We were very intoxicated. We spent the night at Jordan's little condo that she was staying at. We did whatever we did. It was a very blurry night. And the next day, Dre, so I thought, was not trying to pay for my breakfast. And it made me feel like a hoe, essentially. Because I'm like, I don't just lay down with men. I don't just spend the night in beds and let them kiss. And I mean, what? You're not going to pay for my breakfast? I was like, how rude. So anyways, he put a bad taste in my mouth, but then he made it up. We went and we had a very nice date. He was super romantic. He played the piano for me, which I thought was a bit corny because I'm like, who is this guy?
Pay for everything, open doors. She thought.
And here's, as you should, okay? Him paying for dinner was not
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Your old situations.
Yes. I mean, opening the doors is, I was like, oh.
I'm just painting a picture that I was very much of a
He was a gentleman, which I thought he was just trying to get me in bed again, So I went back to Cleveland. We did not speak because he was talking to someone. I was going through what I was going through. And literally I made the commitment to you know what? I do not need to do this. I don't want to date, especially because on our date, essentially I was talking about my relationship the whole time. I remember I cried and I was just a hot mess. And I'm like, I cannot, no. So we ended up not talking. And within that time that we weren't talking, Dre made his decision of waiting for marriage. I had no idea. And I made the decision to abstain from sex until I wanted to wait until I was engaged, until I met the right person. But I didn't think that I would meet the right person anytime soon. So when me and Dre did reconnect, I was like, oh Lord, this was quick. And I was like, geez, if God is real, he works quickly. Okay. Cause I was still trying to figure out, my relationship with God and what is my, do I have a religion? What's my faith situation? I was just a little all over the place. And I was like, wow, I think this God thing is really real. It's I prayed, I worked, and boom, this man just ta-da.
So I want to talk about that as we kind of bring this to a close, which is really how we met and how the person is the one for you. I remember I made the commitment to wait for marriage, and this was my first time really going in at it, no girls, no nothing. And I remember it was March, and I went to my school, JMU, and I'm not going to say a name on this one, but I remember there was a girl there who in undergrad I used to have sex with all the time. And she was there doing her master's. And I ran into her because I was doing a career fair for the job that I worked in. My company was doing stuff there. Ran into her, and like clockwork that night, she was she hit me up. What you doing? It's 1 a.m. I'm just chilling on my friend Lindsay's couch. And she made a lot of convincing arguments to try to get me to come over there. And when I told her I was waiting, she was like, are you doing that for Lent? Or that's like something that you're like legitimately doing. I was like, yeah, I'm waiting for a marriage. And she made convincing arguments, but I actually like turned it down. And I was sitting there just like staring at the ceiling like, I'm really doing this. Like, I'm really doing this. And then the next day, this random girl that I met one weekend from Cleveland, Ohio, texts me and says like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. This is Bre from Ohio, but I'm moving to DC. I wanted to know if you wanted to have like dinner. And that was like, looking back, like confirmation number one. Like when I was really faced with the temptation and the test of, is this commitment that you're going to, that if this thing that you committed to actually real, I feel like I passed that test and God was like, okay, here you go. You know what I mean? So that was crazy. That was like one piece of confirmation for me. The next piece of confirmation, and I'll skip a little bit ahead, is that, so our first real date, like when we knew that we both were like into each other and liked each other, because that first dinner it wasn't like oh, I like you or anything like that, was Jesus Camp. Mm-hmm. That's what we call it. It was like a prophetic conference at Grace Covenant in Chantilly, and Bre was riding dirty down here from Cleveland, license suspended and all.
I've made it through a lot of things.
You really liked me.
I did.
Yeah, license suspended and all, but I did the worst thing that you could tell a woman. Like, she was in Ohio, and this was a week before she was going to come. I was like, I have something to tell you, but I want to tell you when you get here in person.
Honey, look, I was like, oh, Lord, he got 6 toes, a kid on the way, something crazy.
And she kept asking me, what is it? What is it? What is it? And I wouldn't tell her, because I'm like, all right, I knew our first weekend that we met, how that went. But then I'm like, how is she going to take that I want to wait for marriage?
And stop there. Keep in mind, at the exact time, I needed to tell him, because it was obvious that we were like in a space of courting and dating. And I was afraid to tell him that I wanted to wait until like an engagement. Cause I'm like, no man is going to not have sex with someone and put a ring on their finger. They're not going to know what they're getting into. So I was so nervous, and I was like, I'm going to wait until he like loves me because I was just nervous. So full circle, when he tells me.
Yeah, so we sit down and I'm like, we're going over all these things we want in a relationship. And I'm like beating around the bush. I'm not like, I'm saving this for like last. Because imagine, like, if you knew Bre at that time, she was doing shameless classes, Hill 101s.
I was sexy.
Like, she was doing all this sexy stuff. And I'm like, she's not going to take this well. So then before I even said that I was waiting for marriage, she told me that she was waiting to have sex. And I was just like, yo, this is crazy. What? And I just got so excited. I was like, yo, that was the thing I wanted to tell you, is me too. Like, I'm waiting too. And that was like, again, confirmation for me that like, this was the person that I was supposed to be with at this time, for sure. So then when times came, I feel like those moments of confirmation are so important, because at times when things get rough, you kind of got to understand like, all right, things will be tough sometimes, but you're here for a reason. You're in this relationship for a reason. And there are signs that God is giving you to show you that like, this is your person. I brought this person to you in this moment. And it's just about, you know, trying to weather the storms and go through everything that you're supposed to go through. So I think for me, those were the 2 moments to where I was like, this is the person that I think God has for me. And, you know, for me also with Bre, and we could talk about how you knew I was, you know, your man, the one. But for me, I had never met anybody like Bre at all. She was very unique in how she operated, how she talked, how she moved. And it just interests me. Even the first weekend I met her, I wasn't even trying to like get at her or anything, but I was just like, yo, I've never met anybody like you. Like, you're different. And the one thing that I always held on to when my mom told me when she knew that my stepdad, she knew my stepdad was the guy she was going to marry, is that she said that she didn't even really know or notice what he looked like. Like when somebody asked, oh, what does he look like? And she was like, well, I mean, actually, I don't know. He's tall. And I felt the same thing with Bre, is that I remember my friend Remy asked me one time, like, oh, what does she look like? And I was like, I mean, she's like light skinned. It wasn't even like your appearance, even though I'm attracted to you and I was attracted to Bre, that wasn't even like a thing that I was like focused on. What drew me to you wasn't anything like carnal or like physical, I guess. It was like just your energy, your vibe, the way you move. Like it was just that drew me and, made me really love the person that you were versus like some physical thing. So I think at those moments, I kind of knew that you were the one for me. And then the thing, and we'll talk about this in a later episode about how to deal with problems and stuff in your relationship. But I think that even though you came with issues and problems, you were 100% committed to me. And you also acknowledged that you had some issues and that you wanted to fix them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a bumpy ride, but I see this woman's heart. And as my stepdad always says, the most important thing is, does this person have a good heart? Like, does she have a good heart? And I knew Bre's heart was pure. It was great. Like the intentionality and everything was there and real and authentic. And I was like, okay, I can work with this. It's going to be tough to try to unlearn some things that she's learned because she's been hustling all her life to try to get by and do certain things a certain way. But I know ultimately the person of who she is, and she's like genuinely a good person. And I think that all those things together, the confirmation, me understanding and seeing who she really is and knowing that she has a good heart was the thing that made me say, this is the person that I'm choosing to love, because love is a choice. I'm choosing to commit to and choosing to spend the rest of my life with. I didn't fall into that. I made a decision to do that.
Yeah, and it's more difficult for me because I don't know. I feel like that day when you told me you were waiting and I basically agreed to it, I felt like, oh my God, this is my husband. And it was like weird. And I honestly tried to like self-sabotage a few times because of how I think great Dre was. And I did it like openly. I don't know if you knew that it was self-sabotaging myself, but it was almost like, I'm like, does he really love me like this? Like, let's see what he does if I do this or if I say that. And
she did this and
that. I did this and that. And he just was always so calm with me, which even though it upset me at times, because to me, it felt like you didn't care if you weren't yelling at me about it versus like, oh, you care so much that even though I did this or said that, and to be clear with you guys, I never did any infidelity stuff. My doing things was like saying mean things out of my mouth, like calling him out of his name. Or one time I threatened him I was going to have like some guy pay my rent. Like, I got this dude who could do X, Y, and Z. Like, if you won't do it for me, because I had like a bad month. And it was the way that he reacted to all those situations. It wasn't like, all right, bye, see you, good luck with that. It was always so loving and so patient and understanding. So it was like, again, that day at Ovation in the room when we both realized like, oh my gosh, we're about to commit to waiting for marriage. I felt like it was just the clearest moment ever where it was like, this is your person. So yeah, that's that. The second thing would be the day that I moved here. Dre showed up at the apartment, had my U-Haul truck, and he had his car filled with like stuff for the house, like Costco's, like what do you call it? Toilet paper and napkins towels, and soap, like, stuff. Cleaning supplies and my favorite sushi and my favorite bottle of wine and a little card that said we'd be my girlfriend. And I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, how much pressure is this? Like, imagine moving to a new city And I heard the men in DC was something, you know, and I'm like, my initial answer, it was, yeah, I was like, uh-huh. And then later on, I was like, did I really just say yeah? Because like if I'm in a relationship, I'm in a relationship. I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to be slimy. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want to do this. And there was nothing in me other than like pure joy when I woke up the next morning realizing that I told this man I'd be his girlfriend. And it was just like multiple things that gave me clarity. So I mean, I guess our time was the same, but it was just multiple things. So what I would say is something that Dre says a lot that I like is if it doesn't make sense, like don't try to make it make sense. And for us, there was never a moment where we did not make sense, or where we went through something that was like, should we break up? You know what I mean? Like we've never gone through anything that would be like, oh, we're not supposed to be together. And I think so many times when you're in toxic relationships or when you're loving someone who doesn't love you the same way back, you're in a situation where it's clear as day to everyone else that you shouldn't be in that situationship or relationship. And it's hard for you to understand, like, you know, to really understand the red flags versus a yellow flag or like a flag at all and a get the heck out of here. And we just never had those things. And even in marriage, we've probably had more, not issues, but like disagreements or little like moments of like, while being married than we have dating, because you now are adding in the fact that we waited. So we're having sex now. We're like separating our businesses. We have all these changes, but we've never had a situation where it's like, oh, this doesn't make sense. So it just was never forced. And that to me was like, this is what a relationship is supposed to feel like. Two people coming together and choosing to be together, not one person loving the other person more or doing this and being overlooked. It was like, it was always, we're meeting in the middle.
Yeah. And I'll add to that. And first, one of the reasons that I knew Bre was also the person for me, because that was the first relationship I ever had to where when problems came, I didn't want to end the relationship. I wanted to work through them. That was my first relationship I ever wanted to do that. But the biggest thing that I think that you're talking about, which is truly what love is a true commitment to somebody. And that's one of the biggest ways to know, or that should be the foundational thing for knowing if somebody is the one for you, is if they're fully committed to you. If somebody's not fully committed to you, they're not the one. I don't care how good they are, what they do for you. If they're not 100% committed to you, then they're not the one for you. They don't even have to have it all together. But if they're 100% committed to you, then you can work through those things.
Yeah.
Like I always say that if you're a teacher and you want to know if somebody wants to get a good grade in your class, what's the one thing they have to do to show you that?
Show up.
Show up to class. They can tell you all day how much they want to get a good grade in your class. They can come after class and be like, ooh, can I get extra credit? I really want to. But the one way that they can show you that they want a good grade in your class is by showing up to class. Then if they're showing up, taking notes, and they're trying and they're failing, then you can still work with them and you're motivated to work with them because you're like, they're committed. It's just some things that they need help with. Mm-hmm. And that was our relationship, is that we showed up to class every single day. Even if Bre like initially had some things to where it's like, all right, she was trying to figure out things with finances or trying to work through her anger. One thing I didn't have to question was her showing up to class every day. She wanted to be there. She wanted to get it right. And even though it was tough and it was hard for us at times, the commitment was there. A lot of people are out here chasing people who aren't even willing to come to your class, trying to get them to come to class. Mm-hmm. Like, why? Stop chasing people. If they don't want to show up to your class, stop chasing them to try to get them to show up to your class. So that commitment is like really the foundational, like, I can exit a lot of people listening to tell you the person that you talk to is not the one because they're not fully committed. That's probably like 65% of the people listening to this right now.
Yeah.
Because I run into so many things to where it's like, you telling me about this person, they don't even sound committed to you. Mm-hmm. And you trying to make it work. Like they don't even want to show up intentionally for you. So as we round this out, like that's, I think is the foundational thing when finding the right one. And I hope that through our story of how we met, that you kind of get some insight and perspective into what it looks like to find the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with. understanding, you know, the different things that you go through in life and how those shape your opinions and perspectives. And I think the biggest thing is working on yourself is a huge part to prepare yourself for the person that you're ultimately going to spend the rest of your life with.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But yeah, so we have so many more episodes coming. I think that was a good first episode.
Mm-hmm.
People learned a lot about us, a lot about our situation. But we have some really cool episodes coming soon. We're going to talk about us living together and like if you should do that or if you shouldn't and how that affected our relationship. We'll talk about working through problems because we both brought things to the table and we had to work through those things. And because once you make the commitment and you know that this person is the one you want to spend the rest of your life with, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning of everything that you have to go through. Like you still have to work through a lot of different things. And of course, we're going to talk about our weight and like how that was and, you know, the goods, the bads, especially now that everything is full circle, which I think is great. Before we were doing videos in real time. Now we've actually like kind of had the whole experience so we could really tell you, you know, the whole shebang.
I was going to say shebang.
But no, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're on YouTube, please, if you made it to the end of this video, please subscribe. All that's free. Subscribing,
yes,
reviewing, like it's just free stuff that helps us out. So please make sure to do that. Make sure to tune in. We're here every week on Wednesdays. So make sure you tune in and we appreciate you guys. Follow us on Instagram at It's Dre Smith, at Brianna Aponte, and follow the Relationship Restored Instagram.
Ooh, ooh.
Peace out, guys.